Annyeonghaseyo, and welcome to day 2 of Korean War Notes. This one shouldn't be quite as long. We just have a few more slides left. I was lucky enough to actually visit Korea a few years ago. It's one of the coolest places that I have ever been, and it's absolutely beautiful. So I want to talk about a couple of things before we get rolling. First of all, you need to know how to say hello in Korean, and it goes like this: Annyeonghaseyo. So repeat after me: Annyeonghaseyo. And we bow. Ready? Annyeonghaseyo. Very nice. To say goodbye, we say annyeonghaseyo. So you add the he in the middle. So it goes annyeonghaseyo. Repeat after me. Annyeonghaseyo. And we bow. Annyeonghaseyo. Very good. One of the coolest things that I thought was neat about Korea is that they really respect their culture, and they teach their youth the traditions, like the Korean tea ceremony. They wear clothing, like, let me show you over here, like this beautiful hanbok. And they wear those for special occasions, but yet they also do stuff like you do. They listen to music like you do and wear jeans like you do. So they have a really nice balance of that. I brought a couple of things from over there. This is a t-shirt from the DMZ. Can you see that there? Very cool. We'll talk about the DMZ quite a bit today. One of the things that I find really sad about the Korean War is, I have a big old movie collection and books back there, and they're all about history. This is how many movies I have on the Korean War, right here, 2 of them, and I got both of them when I was in Korea. What does that say about the U.S.? We need to do better, I think. Both of these I would recommend. Taegukji is about 2 brothers that are fighting in the Korean War. Very good. Subtitles. Okay. And then this one's called JSA, and it's about a current event that happens along the DMZ. It's really good. So I would recommend both of those while you're sitting at home and want to earn some extra credit. But even like books, I have like 4 or 5 books, diaries on the Korean War, as compared to like a whole shelf of World War II. And we're losing our Korean War veterans, and we really need to respect them and celebrate them. I know some of you have relatives that fought in the Korean War, and I am looking forward to hearing your stories. I've heard from some of you already. Okay, so before we get into our notes today, I want to talk about the map of Korea, because one of the things you're going to do on your test is you're going to basically tell us what happened in the war by using pictures on the map from your notes. So if you look at those maps, those will help you. You'll just know step by step what happened. So to begin with, who invaded who? Remember? Yep. North Korea invades South Korea. Right at the end of World War II, the communists go in and they try to take they take North Korea first of all, and then they're trying to cross that border. So our American soldiers come over from Japan mostly, and they're trying to protect South Korea. And if you remember, when the North Koreans come in, they push us all the way down to Busan, way down here. Our back's against the wall, we're against the water, we're in trouble. And then we plan this surprise attack. It was one of the best attacks of the whole war. We did a feint up this way to kind of draw attention. And then we came around and did an amphibious attack on Incheon right here. And if you remember, the reason they didn't expect us at Incheon was because it had high tides, so they never thought we would risk that. There's another movie out recently that's called Operation Chromite that talks about this attack that I'd really recommend too. It's a really good one. Okay, so we're successful in taking Incheon, and we're doing so well that we start pushing, and we push all the way up to the Yalu River, and our North Korean soldiers jump on the other side of the river because, of course, China is an ally and they're communist, right? So what does the president tell us to do? He tells us to stop and don't go over that border because we don't want to get into a war with China. We've got enough problems, right? But what does MacArthur say? I want to go get that enemy, and I don't blame him. They're right there. They're hiding over that river. And so he attacks over that river, and in comes the Chinese army. And for a long time, we didn't really know what was going on completely, because obviously we didn't see a difference. We just knew there were a lot of soldiers, and they were cornering our guys right here in the frozen Chosin. Remember that? A lot of our guys died here, and then some of them came out and escaped through a port city over here, and they brought them back to South Korea. At that point, if you remember, General MacArthur ends up getting let go by the president. We'll read an article about that later this week. And Matthew Ridgway takes over, and they kind of get stuck in a stalemate right here along the DMZ. And that's kind of where we're at in our notes for today. So let's pick up where we left off. Try to get this in the right spot and get our notes back up. So if you remember, part of the reason we were stuck in this stalemate was because of our POWs, right? We were trying to decide what we were going to do with our POWs. And remember, we had 21 Americans that were POWs that didn't want to come back to the United States. And then we also had POWs that didn't want to go back to Korea. So we couldn't agree about what to do with those POWs. We assumed that we were saving the Korean POWs from going into communism and assumed our U.S. soldiers had been brainwashed. Now, from what I've read, I read a couple of articles about it. They didn't so much physically torture. At the beginning they did, but not so much at the end. But there was some mental stuff going on, so that's possible. So kind of interesting. At the end of the Korean War, we passed this executive order that said when you are a POW, you are no longer allowed to work with the enemy, because some of our POWs did in this case. They made it illegal. And they said that a soldier is only allowed to give 3 pieces of information. Do you know what it is? Who's going to get the bonus? I can hear you out there, Will. You're right. It is name, rank, and serial number. That's right, 3 things. Now, we'll talk about that executive order and how we're going to have to really look at that after Vietnam when our guys are being tortured as POWs. And that adds a whole nother element to it, doesn't it? Okay, so what ends up happening? We basically agreed to just let those POWs do what they want to do. And some of them have come back since then, if you read the articles about them. So they were exchanged here on Freedom Bridge. That's where I'm standing, actually. And the peace talks were held in Panmunjom, which is a city right along the DMZ over here in our map, okay? It was concluded July of 1953, and here's what happened. They basically signed an armistice, one of our vocab words, which is a ceasefire. And the prisoners of war were sent home, and the DMZ, or demilitarized zone, was created on the 38th parallel between the North and South. Now understand that an armistice does not mean that the war is over. It just means that we've agreed to stop shooting at each other. And technically, that has not happened yet. So we are technically still at war between North and South Korea, and there have been some shootings across the DMZ. We just don't hear about it as much over in the United States. All right, let's take a look at this map here. So North and South Korea are still technically at war because no peace treaty has been signed, and they are still divided on that 38th parallel. Korean War, obviously, sometimes we'll have the nickname of the Yo-Yo War because we went back and forth over the DMZ so many times. So remember a yo-yo, and you'll remember the Korean War and crossing that DMZ. Okay? So here's some pictures of Panmunjom. I was only allowed to be here for like a couple minutes and take pictures, about 1 minute actually, because they don't want you to do anything that might offend. So I am standing on the South Korean embassy. That's the North Korean building there. And then they would negotiate right here in this blue building. You'll notice that there are guards out all the time, and they take their jobs very, very seriously, and for good reason. And then this line right here, that is the line between North and South Korea. If you'll look, I took a picture of this and then I zoomed in later. Take a look at what I saw in the window there. Obviously somebody is either looking at us or taking pictures of us or something. Kind of freaks me out a little bit, but yep, here's the line between North and South Korea. This is actually inside the blue building. I am technically standing in North Korea. I don't even know if you'd be allowed to go to the DMZ right now. Depends on how things are, but at that time, things were somewhat cool. So this table is laid right along the line of North and South Korea. So the North Koreans sit on this side, the South Koreans sit on this side, and so I'm technically in North Korea. I did get in a little bit of trouble. I didn't know that was the rule, but you're not supposed to stand that close to a soldier because you might try to take his weapon or something like that. So I got in a little bit of trouble. As we drove through the DMZ, and remember that the DMZ kind of goes like this. It might be thin in one part where you could reach across it almost, and then there's a part that might be as thick as a lake. But here you'll see these are towers in South and North Korea overlooking the DMZ. And it's actually kind of a beautiful area. It's a lot of greenery, a lot of beautiful animals and birds and things. However, there are all kinds of landmines in there. So every once in a while you'll hear an explosion, or you'll see an animal with a missing limb because they've stood on a landmine. So it's a very difficult place to cross, not easy. And people have tried, definitely. This was our tour guide. That was the most I could get out of him as a smile. He was pretty darn serious. But you'll notice that these guardhouses are every mile, all the way along the DMZ as you drive along. This one here, this is kind of a place where people remember their family and friends who they've been split away from because the DMZ went up so quickly. They have prayer ribbons for their loved ones here, and there's pictures and letters posted there. It's a very emotional place to be. Well, I didn't realize it at the time, but I took an illegal picture. Back behind these ribbons, I heard a noise, and so I kind of peeked behind there, and I took pictures, and it turns out that they were changing guards at the guard tower, and I guess you're not supposed to take a picture of that, but anyway, so it was a really interesting place to be, that's for sure. All right, so let's talk about what we know now about the Korean War and some things that are going on today. All right, first of all, we now know that there were Soviets fighting in Korea. You know, they didn't admit that back then, but they didn't want anybody else flying their MiGs. Those were those nice planes, right? So they were the ones actually flying them, and they were disguised as Chinese pilots, and they had a lot of victories because the MiGs were really great planes, and that has been kept secret for over 50 years, and since then we have found out that that was true. There have been different accusations on both sides. The U.S. said North Koreans tortured and murdered almost 5,000 POWs. North Koreans accused the U.S. of killing civilians with bombing and germ warfare. We do know, if you remember napalm, that gas jelly bomb that we talked about at the end of World War II, we dropped more napalm on Korea than we ever did in Vietnam. And yet it's kind of known for the movies in Vietnam, stuff like that. In March of just the year 2000, not too long ago, North Korea called for a UN investigation about the treatment of their people. So we definitely have had some accusations there between both sides. After the war, 70% of Korean industry is wiped out. I mean, you talk about having to start over. My goodness. 1.5 million Chinese and North Koreans killed. You know, we forget that when you have a war between a North and South, I mean, we had our Civil War, but, I mean, this is killing all of their people, right? Whether they're on the North or the South side of the DMZ, these are their people and they're dying. If you look at the cost in human life, notice the largest group were North Koreans and Chinese soldiers and civilians, about 780,000. 500,000 South Korean civilians killed. If you look at South Korean soldiers, 70,000. The U.S. had 4,500 soldiers killed. And then other United Nations countries had about 30,000 deaths in comparison. So technically, there were supposedly 76,000 POWs in the South, 70,000 POWs in the North. And they say that there are still 300 still alive in North Korea today. That's why we always remember POWs. That's at least the current statistic anyway. Now we're going to take a moment and I want to play a song for you and show you some pictures. It's kind of an interesting song. This is a song by Jimmy Osborne called Thank God for Victory in Korea. And I'd really like you to just listen to the lyrics and then I'm going to play some pictures for you of this video. Okay, so enjoy.
Thank you, dear God, for victory in Korea. We're grateful that the battle's won. We give you the praise for victory in Korea. We thank you, dear God, for what you've done. Oh, children and wives. They were willing to die for you and me. Night and day they did fight for the cause that is right, for America and its liberty. Thank you, dear God, for victory in Korea. We're grateful that the battle's won. We give you the praise for victory in Korea. We thank you, dear God, for what you've done. For a while it looked to me we would be pushed into the sea, but the good Lord said, I will not let you down. He gave us tanks, planes, and guns, so America's fighting sons have old glory waving in Korea now. Thank you, dear God, for victory in Korea. We're grateful that the battle's won. We give you the praise for victory in Korea. We thank you, dear God, for what you've done. We must kneel and pray that peace will come and stay. For this world, it is full of greed and hate. The aggressor's waiting there, but we can't stop him with a prayer. So let's talk to God before it is too late. Thank you, dear God, for victory in Korea. We're grateful that the battle's won. We give you the praise for victory in Korea. We thank you, dear God, for what you've done.
All right. So I wanted to just ask you a couple of questions about some of the pictures that you saw. First of all, what was the age of most of the guys that you saw in there? Oops. Getting more music there. You'll notice that a lot of the guys were probably in their 20s. So they're a little bit older than what we'll find in Vietnam as we get to our next unit. Very similar to what we might have seen in World War II. And even just the idea of fighting for your country was very similar to World War II. They felt they were doing their duty for their country, and they were trying to get rid of or contain communism, right? Whereas in Vietnam, it was not popular by the end of the war to be fighting over there. Did you notice that we had mixed units? We had white and black fighting together in the Korean War a little bit. I don't know if you noticed that. You saw some of the weapons that they used. Very similar. We see a lot of T-34 tanks on the Russian side anyway, and they used those in World War II. Similar equipment, similar guns. Did you notice the weather? A lot of cold weather, didn't you? Although in the summer, it's very similar to what you might find here in South Dakota, actually. But it got really, really cold, especially up in the north, up in that frozen chosen area. Now remember, the song said, thank God for victory in Korea. There's obviously a discussion about whether it was a victory. You know, think about it. What was our goal? Was it to get rid of communism, or was it to contain communism? If it was to contain communism, then technically they did what they were supposed to do, right? And that was to keep it in the north. But I think, again, we were all afraid of communism back then. Now we know that that wasn't necessarily the purpose. Like, they didn't want to, like, kill everybody that wasn't communist. But boy, there was a lot of fear on both sides, wasn't there? So something to think about anyway. So let's take a look at Korea today. Now, in South Korea, very prosperous. If there's something that I was surprised about, you know, I'd seen so many pictures of Korea in the Korean War that I pictured this old 1950s Korea. It is actually more technological than the U.S. is today. Like, my goodness, they were paying for things on credit cards and stuff like that with Zappin way before we ever were. They had so many little gadgets in our bathroom in the hotel, I didn't even know how to use all of them in the shower and the toilet. They had floating opera houses going down the river. They had bulletin boards that were like video boards that were the size of this building. Just really cool stuff. They're the leading automaker in the world, one of them. The U.S. is still over there today, of course. We have a huge presence in the DMZ. In fact, it is the most fortified military front in the world. It still is. So it's a very tense place. And again, they take their job very seriously over there. And they should, based on the number of times that there have been crossings or shootings across the DMZ over the years. North Korea today, extremely poor. Availability of food is a problem, which is actually why they have such a good army, because if you fight in the army, your family gets food. So they want to do whatever they can to survive. Now, you maybe have heard this, but there are a couple of places right over the DMZ where the government will bring visitors to show them how prosperous their country is. And it's kind of like a stage. And they bring in people to live there so that it looks like a great place. But the majority of North Korea is very poor. Obviously, we have a nuclear issue with North Korea. Over the years, things have changed a little bit. We started with Kim Jong-il, which was this guy here. That's Kim Il-sung's son. That was in the Korean War. So he died, and his son took over, the one you know now, which is Kim Jong-un. And when Kim Jong-un took over, we thought maybe things would be good. And at first there was a lot of threats, right? That we have the power to nuke you and blah, blah, blah. And we're telling people not to have weapons and whatnot. At this point, we don't think they have the capacity to attack the United States all the way across the world. But they definitely have the capacity to attack countries near them. So our worry is that they would maybe attack some of our allies. However, remember that when President Trump took over, they started to communicate, which is a really great thing. We're starting to see some communication at least going on between North Korea and the United States and South Korea. So that is a start for sure. So I wanted to leave you with a cartoon before we finish up here. I wanted you to take a look at this, and based on your notes today, and what you know about North Korea and South Korea and the U.S. today, see if you can decipher this cartoon. I'll give you a minute to look at it. Okay, so who are our characters? Who's this guy here? Yeah, Kim Jong-un, the leader of North Korea. And of course, we've got the U.S. trying to play the official between North and South Korea. And what kind of weapon is North Korea using? Of course, we have our nukes, our nuclear missiles. And you see that he's just blasted South Korea. And this maybe is saying that we're kind of sitting on the sideline, saying you've just made a mistake. Are we taking it seriously or not? I don't know. I don't know what this artist thinks about that. Are we doing enough? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. Thought that was a fun one. Okay, so just a recap about the importance of the Korean War. It is the first armed Cold War confrontation, where we actually are shooting at each other over the Cold War. It is the first war that starts what we call limited warfare, one of our vocab words, which means that you have these weapons that are better and can kill more people, but nobody wants to go there because nobody wants to use nukes against their enemy, because that means we could blow the world up, you know what I mean? So we just don't go there. We threaten, but we don't go there. This is also where we see two superpowers in the Cold War fighting through another country. And where are we going to go after this? Yep, we're going to end up in Vietnam doing the same exact thing in North and South Vietnam. Yeah. The years of the war, remember, 1950 to 1953. So if you can remember in your heads the 1950s for the Korean War, that would be really good for you and your future. Next stop, as we said, we're headed to Vietnam. All right, you guys, I think that's it for our notes. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you're safe and I hope you're well. I miss seeing your faces, but I thought at least you could see mine today and we get our notes finished up. So have a great day. And we will see you later.